Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today is March 10th and it is the day of the 96 Academy Awards. In order, I will be ranking the first 10 Best Picture winners. Before I start, I want to tell you how I'm ranking these. So I'll be ranking them by tiers. The tiers are bad, decent, good, great, amazing, and perfect. So starting off in the bad tier, coming at number 10 is the second Best Picture winner, the Broadway Melody. This was not only the first talkie to win Best Picture, but also the first MGM musical. Even though it achieved a lot, it's still a bad film. It's really boring, and the film is full of dislikable characters. The only character that I actually liked was the uncle who stutters. I felt really bad for him, as his nieces make fun of him. As you can tell, I really didn't like this. It's currently my least favorite Best Picture winner on this list, and in general. Number 9 is still in the bad category, but it has more redeeming qualities than the Broadway Melody. It's Cavalcade. It's another really boring film, but the decent performances and likable characters definitely elevate it. Like I said before, it's a bad film. It's way too long, and suffers from slow pace. There wasn't a moment where I was remotely interested in what was going on. Personally, I would have picked either Lady for a Day or A Farewell to Arms to win. We're moving on to the decent tier with 1931's Cimarron. Cimarron stars Richard Dix and Irene Dunne. Dunne being one of my favorite actresses from the classic Hollywood era, so it was a treat seeing her in one of her early roles. The film is much more exciting than I was expecting. It has a couple cool shootouts in the film that made me enjoy it more than the two ranked below this. The film hasn't aged all that well, and it's quite racist. It also is a bit too long, and the last 45 minutes or so were actually really boring. It's a shame since I thought the first hour and 15 minutes were okay. They weren't as bad as other people were saying, but then the last 45 minutes came and I was really not enjoying it. Once again, we're still in the decent tier with the 1937 Warner Brothers produced film, The Life of Émilie Zola. The film stars Paul Mutiny and is directed by William Dieterle. I can see how this won, but it's just not for me. I loved Mutiny. I was not a big fan of Gail Sondergaard, but I was, and still am, mixed on the rest of the film. Might revisit this film in the future though, because I want to see if my rating and my appreciation of the film improves. But right now, it's in the decent tier. Coming at number 6 is the last of the decent tier films. It was also the last film I needed to watch for this video. It's The Great Ziegfeld from 1936. The reason why I chose this as my last film was because it's the longest out of the 10. It's over 3 hours, and you can definitely feel that runtime. I'm all for long films, but this is unnecessarily long. And when you're bored from for the majority of this film, it's a huge problem. I loved William Powell and Myrna Loy. This is one of their 14 collaborations together. Wasn't a fan of Louise Rayner, though. I found her performance to be very overdramatic. I'm still baffled that she won. She did also win the year later for The Good Earth. I haven't seen that film. I actually haven't seen any other films from her besides this. I don't plan to see any other in the future. I also really like seeing Frank Morgan. He's a favorite character actor of mine, so he was a delight. But really, there wasn't else that I particularly enjoyed besides the huge musical numbers. Those were really cool to see, but yeah, I wasn't a big fan of this. It's still a 6 on 10 for me though, and if you're interested in watching it and you love William Powell and Myrna Loy, definitely check this one out. I also forgot to mention Myrna Loy is only in this for like 50 minutes. She should have been in it for much more because she's like top billed. So moving on to the good tier, we have Mutiny on the Bounty. I wasn't expecting to enjoy Mutiny on the Bounty as much as I did. I wasn't expecting to dislike Mutiny on the Bounty, but I was just expecting an average film. Lawton was the standout, really was. He was phenomenal. He should have won Best Actor in my opinion. Instead, Victor McLaglen won for The Informer. And I have seen that film. I actually watched it this month. And I did like that performance, however, I didn't think he should have won the Oscar for that film. Gable, also, I would have loved to see him win. He won for the previous year for It Happened One Night, another one of the Best Picture winners I will be talking about in this video. And you know, speaking of Gable, he gives a great performance. I'm not a big fan of him as much as everybody else is, but watching another one of his films and liking his performance definitely does help. This film is long. It's about 2 hours and 10 minutes, maybe longer than that. But the pacing, it's really well paced, and it doesn't feel that long. And I don't even think there was one moment where I was bored. It was just a good Best Picture winner, and I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. At number 4 is Grand Hotel. And this is one of the best casts of all time. Joan Crawford, Lionel and John Barrymore, Wallace Beery, and I can't forget about Greta Garbo. I'm not surprised at this one. It's a really well-made film, and it has a large scale. And this features one of my favorite Joan Crawford performances, and I do really enjoy watching Greta Garbo. Forgot her name there for a second. But I enjoy her much more in the other film I've seen her in, which is Lubitsch's Ninotchka, which I think is a masterpiece. And thing is, I don't know what else to say about it. Really, it's a film that you should go in blindly, like I did, and enjoy. It was also featured in Billy Wilder's 1960 masterpiece, The Apartment. I just rewatched that a couple of months ago, and if you have seen the film, it's where Baxter's character, the Jack Lemmon character, he's puts on the TV and it's about to play.
Proudly present Greta Garbo, John Barrymore, Joan Crawford, Wallace Beery, and Lionel Barrymore in Grand Hotel.
So that's Grand Hotel. That's the last of the good tier. Now we're going to the great tier, and the first in that tier is actually the first Best Picture one, which is behind me, is Wings. As you can see behind me, where it was, it's now in my hand, I actually own the Blu-ray from Paramount. It's a good release. There's also a Masters of Cinema release for this film. And it's one of the best films, I would say, of all time. It accomplished so much for cinema, and it's really important to not only the Academy Awards history, but also film history. The film stars Clara Bow, who's really good in this film, Charles Rogers, Richard Arlen, and a young Gary Cooper. If you follow me on Letterboxd, you would know that I love Gary Cooper, and I've seen about 20 of his films. So watching him in an early performance definitely was cool, even though he only appears in the film for about a minute, which is a shame. This was also directed by William Wellman, also known as Wild Bill. He's one of my favorite filmmakers. He directed some of my favorite films of all time, such as The Public Enemy, Night Nurse, and a really underrated Jane Stewart film, Magic Town. Of all the films that I'm going to talk about today, including that one, I would highly recommend checking this one out. First, it's the first Best Picture winner. I don't know if I even mentioned that. And really, it's just an important film to cinema, and I think it's a required viewing for any film fan. So that is Wings. At number 2 is the 1930 Universal classic All Quiet on the Western Front. This film has been remade a couple of times in 1979 and most recently in 2022. That remake won a couple of Oscars, and I actually haven't seen those two remakes. This was my first time experiencing the story, and I really enjoyed it. Is it perfect? No, at least in my opinion. I can understand why someone would call it perfect. And I think it's one of the greatest war films of all time. It's about these young boys who are really excited to go into war, and then they actually experience it for themselves, and they see the true horrors of it. And it's actually quite shocking by today's standards. It's really violent. Once again, even by today's standards, there's a scene where this man is blown up and you see nothing but his hands, which have been technically blown off, and you see them on this bar. And I was shocked by that scene. Personally, I was really shocked. And it also has, in my opinion, one of the greatest endings of all time. And it's long, for sure. Like most of these Best Picture winners I've talked about, I've said that they're really long, because they're pretty long. since I was so invested in the story, it didn't really bother me, the pacing, and it was really well paced. So that is All Quiet on the Western Front. If you haven't seen that film, I highly recommend it, and I wouldn't be surprised if I check out the remakes. And at number 1 is the classic Frank Capra film, It Happened One Night, starring Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. They both won Oscars for this film. And actually, this was the first film to win the big 5 Oscars, which are, I believe, Best Director, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, and I believe Best Original Screenplay, or Best Adapted, because this was based off the story, I believe, called Night Bus. So I think it might be Best Adapted Screenplay. No, it does say Screenplay, just Best Screenplay. But this is one of the first screwball comedies and one of the first romantic comedies. And it really set the formula for the romantic comedy genre. And it's just a classic that never gets old. I've seen it a couple of times now, and it's a perfect film. So it is going in that perfect tier. And this is the 4K release from Columbia. As you can see, I have my Columbia Classics box set up there. And it comes with the Blu-ray and the 4K. The 4K is pretty good. It also comes with this edition, or this release of the film, comes with the remake starring June Allison, Jock Lemmon, called You Can't Run Away From It. I haven't heard many good things about it. I haven't even checked it out, so I probably will in the near future. On the Blu-ray disc, it comes with the Frank Capra Jr. audio commentary, and the Frank Capra Jr. Remembers It Happened One Night. There's also Screwball Comedy, featurette, an original live radio broadcast, and a theatrical trailer. So if you're interested in this box set, I believe it's still in print. I definitely would recommend that box set. But more about It Happened One Night. The performances here are fantastic. It also has Walter Connolly, who's another one of my favorite character actors. And it's a classic story of romance. How she's run away from her father because her father doesn't want her to get married to this guy named King Wesley. It isn't Clark Gable. And so she leaves and goes on a bus where she meets this news reporter played by Clark Gable, and love blossoms and stuff. I'm not gonna spoil the entire movie. Yeah, It Happened One Night. What more can I say about it? It's a perfect film in my opinion, and an enduring classic, and one that has aged remarkably well. So that is my ranking of the 10 first Best Picture winners. If this video does well, I'll probably watch and rank the next 10 next Oscar season. So I'll see you then. Well, actually, no, I'm not going to see you then. I'm going to see you in another video, which will be made before then. But anyways, that's a wrap.